As a storyteller and an essayist, I'd like to take a bit of creative liberty to narrate the following events in a slightly non-linear manner. Please bear with me. I sincerely hope you see the point by the end of this video. The wonderful thing about life, humans, and forming opinions about reality is that we always get an opportunity to test our observations. Richard Feynman famously said, "It doesn't matter how beautiful your theory is, it doesn't matter how smart you are. If it doesn't agree with the experiment, it's wrong." This approach towards life is visibly absent among feminist communities. Theirs is more about selling hysteria and falsified data with sinister intentions that will help them maintain power over policy and public opinion by manipulating their views, strike down and smear anything that offers dissent. Here's a clear demonstration based on publicly available data. Take Sandra Horley, for example, who replaced Erin Pizzi as the CEO of Refuge UK. She openly acknowledges the unwillingness to recognize men as victims because it affects their funding for women. While the term woke politics is relatively new, I'll be examining its younger version when the term woke itself was not around. What you will discover through this video is that the years 1994, 95, and 96 were very crucial in New Zealand men's rights movement. When we talk about men's rights, most of the conversations, at least in the mainstream spaces, seem to focus on few countries like US, UK, Canada, Australia, India, France, Germany, and alike. For me, I wanted to dig even deeper and see if our situations match with other countries as a way to test our hypothesis and find out if men in those places face the same problem as well. New Zealand has been the chosen one for this experiment for the reason that it's been away from the public eye, and the things I found out were not only surprising but shockingly similar. I'll be touching upon three separate events that are interlinked. First is from 2010. Second would be the interaction between the men's rights activist Peter Zohrab and the TV broadcasting station in 1995 regarding the Matrimonial Property Act. Third story is going to be about how an American movie helped New Zealand men's rights movement and also the events surrounding Domestic Violence Act 1995. Let's dive in. Story 1. What I'm about to tell you is a summary of real events. What if I tell you one man's 2010 vacation to New Zealand exposed an uncomfortable truth about their airlines? Around late 2010, Paul Elam of AVFM stepped aboard Air New Zealand with high hopes. The service was impeccable: smooth ticketing, attentive crew, fine food, and the thrill of touching down in a stunning land. Not too long after he had purchased tickets for the trip, he was made aware that Air New Zealand enforced the rule straight from the gynocentric playbook. They seem to have a policy of disallowing unaccompanied children to be seated next to male customers, as though males, as an identified group, carry with them an increased risk of child molestation and or other harmful behavior. What it means is that male passengers were automatically branded potential threats, child molesters in waiting, while women received the implicit halo of universal trustworthiness. When seats were tight, the airline would endeavor to seat a female passenger beside the minors. Men, regardless of character, profession, or record, were shuffled away like suspects in a lineup. Paul Elam, no stranger to the sting of misandry, fired off a sharp letter to the executive suite. He praised the airline's professionalism, then delivered the gut punch that this wasn't protection, it was profiling. He highlighted that the New Zealand Airlines indirectly taught children that men as a class are dangerous and women are above suspicion. He noted the hypocrisy. Male pilots flew the planes, yet somehow only male passengers posed risks. The executive team itself was mostly men, apparently safe enough to run the company but not to sit near a kid. The airline's reply came swiftly. On or around November 26, 2010, customer support specialist Claire McLister responded with corporate courtesy but zero substance. She confirmed the policy of seating unaccompanied minors near the galley for crew surveillance and preferring female passengers when seats were tight. It was standard practice, she said, used by leading airlines. No data, no justification. just deflection and an awkward assumption that Paul Elam had been traveling with his non existent wife. Paul Elam fired back the same day, exposing the non answer. He challenged them to explain the basis for their gender based discrimination, while also highlighting that a primary competitor among the USA to New Zealand air service providers who avoided such policies, and British Airways, who had also dropped a similar policy after litigation and rejected the everyone else does it excuse. The airline stood firm, revealing a deep seated institutional bias. This wasn't child protection, it was institutionalized misandry, lazy, fear mongering, and deeply unfair. In the name of shielding the vulnerable, Air New Zealand bred suspicion towards ordinary men while lowering the guards against actual risks. One man's vacation highlighted a broader truth. When policies paint males with the brush of collective guilt, airlines may not lose the customers, but definitely lose integrity, flying headlong into the clouds of sexism under the banner of safety. It was clear. For men, they came with a seatbelt of prejudice. Air New Zealand stood firm on its policy, but the attitude demonstrated in their response was very clear. They are clearly guilty of discrimination at 30,000 feet. Story 2. In the winter of 1995, New Zealand television lit up living rooms with a seemingly straightforward current affairs program. On 31st August 1995, TV1's assignment aired a segment from 7:30 to 8:30 p.m. examining proposed reforms to the Matrimonial Property Act. The focus was about moving beyond the rigid 50-50 split of assets after divorce to better protect the custodial parent who often faced greater financial strain. What played out on screen was a parade of politicians, lawyers, and experts nodding in consensus towards seemingly fairer changes. Women, frequently portrayed as custodial parents who were left vulnerable, took center stage in the case studies. What about fathers and men's studies perspectives then? They are largely invisible. Only one lone voice pushed back against scrapping the 50-50 rule, and even then, his personal custody battle was downplayed. On 23rd September 1995, Peter Zohrab, the secretary of the New Zealand Men's Rights Association, fired off a formal complaint to Television New Zealand. He accused the broadcaster of blatant bias, where there is no platform for men's groups opposing the reforms, and a narrative that reinforced deep societal and court biases against fathers seeking custody. The program, he argued, painted marriage as a vehicle for women to claim children and assets while sidelining men's realities. It wasn't balance, it was gynocentric storytelling that treated men as secondary, if not suspect. TVNZ responded on 10th October 1995, brushing it aside. They claimed this wasn't a gender issue, but just a technical property reform. They hinted that women are the natural custodial parents and there was no need to include men's rights voices when there was already a broad consensus. They rejected any discrimination claim outright. Undeterred, Peter Zohrab referred the matter to Broadcasting Standards Authority. On 14th December 1995, the BSA Broadcasting Standards Authority delivered its ruling under the chair Judith Potter that the complaint was dismissed. The program reflected the assumed reality that mothers were more natural nurturers. No bias against men was perceived, it seems. Parental status wasn't even protected under anti discrimination rules. The authority upheld the broadcaster's right to frame the story this way. This wasn't neutral journalism. It was institutional shrugging at male disadvantage, broadcasting only a one sided narrative that normalized viewing fathers as less central, less deserving, and less worthy of balanced airtime. In the name of protecting the vulnerable, New Zealand's public broadcaster and regulator amplified gynocentric assumptions while silencing men's pushback. One TVR in 1995 exposed a deeper pattern. When family law and media converge, men often find themselves edited out of the story. Story 3. On March 12, 1993, Early reviews were published about an American TV movie called Men Don't Tell, starring Peter Strauss and Judith Light. This movie was based on real events and showed another side of the spousal violence, strengthening the observations that were already being made by activists like Erin Pizzi and domestic violence researchers like Murray Strauss, confirming that women too in marriages can be extremely abusive towards their husbands. After its official premiere on March 14, 1993, and great ratings, it received immediate backlash from several women's rights groups, making it difficult for rebroadcast on the TV in the later months. It was eventually forgotten. That was until 16th April 1996, where it made a re entry into household television, creating a landmark moment for raising awareness about male victims of domestic violence in New Zealand. The television screening of Men Don't Tell exposed a raw, hidden reality that gynocentric discourse had long denied. Airing at 8:30 p.m. on a Friday, the program triggered an unprecedented response after the movie advertised a phone number at the end credits with a voiceover suggesting that abused men should ask for help. Martin Lewis, the coordinator and the organizers at the Men's North Shore Center, fielded 72 calls that night and over the weekend. 12 handled live, 60 diverted to an answering machine that maxed out. Another 30 calls flooded in on Monday and Tuesday. A press release noting around 100 calls led to further coverage in the Dominion and provincial papers, bringing the total to approximately 150 calls over subsequent weeks. The breakdown was indeed shocking. 34% was from parents, siblings, friends, and neighbors with clear evidence, including personal assaults, of men being abused, where men who either stayed silent or were disbelieved by doctors, agencies, or police. 32% was from men who had escaped such relationships, often at immense physical, emotional, and material cost, including profound grief over lost children and homes. 26% was from men still trapped, terrified of disclosure lest their partners intercept mail or calls. 8% was from women in relationships with men who were previously abused, now bearing secondary consequences. This was not abstract statistics. It was living proof of male victims ignored, shamed, and dismissed in a culture primed to see men only as perpetrators. Ironically, few months later, on 1st July 1996, the Domestic Violence Act introduced in 1995 came into full force. It dramatically expanded the definition of violence and supercharged state intervention into private lives. In one of the first applications, North Shore Family Court issued a protection order at police request on behalf of a 20-year-old woman without her knowledge or consent. Police forcibly removed her partner from the home against her explicit wishes. Stephen Worth was later prosecuted for assault despite his girlfriend refusing to testify. Police used a victim impact report she had earlier signed as evidence against him. This was gynocentrism in action, policy built on the assumption that women are perpetual victims needing rescue even from their own choices, while men's agency, consent, and due process were disposable. These events did not occur in a vacuum. They were fueled by the Hitting Home report, Men Speak About Abuse of Women Partners, a Justice Department backed project released in 1995 based on data submitted by Julie Liebrecht, Judy Paulin, and Robin Ransom. The initial survey work began roughly around late 1993 and early 1994, involving a nationally representative sample of around 2,000 men with a subsample of 200. The report ended up claiming skewed and exaggerated figures, stating that 21% of men admitted physically abusing female partners in the previous 12 months and 53% psychologically abused them. It painted a false picture of widespread male acceptance of violence and was trumpeted across media as proof of a pervasive crisis requiring urgent and expensive action. These inflated definitions with ideological blindness forced several critics who quickly exposed the report as advocacy research masquerading as science. Definitions of abuse were absurdly broad. Physical abuse included pushing, shoving, grabbing, or throwing anything. Psychological abuse covered criticizing family or friends, swearing, preventing access to money, or trying to stop a partner from doing something she wanted. Dr. Greg Newbold, a sociologist from University of Canterbury at the time, delivered a blistering critique in the press around April 1995. He argued that the findings did not support the conclusions. Serious violence was rare in the data. Most so called abuse was minor or contextual. The study ignored women's violence despite overseas evidence showing rough gender symmetry and bidirectional aggression, with women being the primary initiators. The study also failed to record ethnicity despite stark Maori overrepresentation in severe violence and downplayed class employment links. By surveying only men and framing abuse as a male problem, it guaranteed a skewed narrative. Newbold warned that such moral panic would produce bad public policy, asinine law, and the destruction of innocent people. Martin Lewis of the Men's Center North Shore was equally scathing. He called Hitting Home Report a distorted and damaging document that would help neither sex. Lewis highlighted reputable international studies showing roughly equal rates of aggressive acts by men and women in heterosexual relationships. He noted men's reluctance to report female violence due to shame and disbelief and pointed out that casting women solely as helpless victims undermine genuine female strength while excusing female perpetration. The New Zealand Skeptics Society even gave the Ministry of Justice its 1995 Bent Spoon Award for pseudoscience for the publishing of the Hitting Home report that clearly trivialized real violence by inflating minor behaviors into meaningless levels. They criticized the selective focus on male to female abuse while ignoring context, reciprocity, and the full dynamics of relationships. Sadly, however, nearly 30 years later, the new committee declared the award was not justified and apologized for lack of critical thinking. This is not a mere correction, but proof how quickly the sane minded critical thinkers get carried away due to their inherent gynocentric blindness. So, to sum it up, a methodologically flawed 1994-95 report steeped in broad definitions and one-sided assumptions provided flawed evidence as the base for 1995 Domestic Violence Act in New Zealand. That act enabled immediate state overreach in 1996. When the movie Men Don't Tell aired, the resulting cries of male victims were met by a system already primed to disbelieve them. This was never about balanced protection from violence. It was about institutionalizing a worldview in which men are inherently dangerous, women perpetually vulnerable, and any challenge to that orthodoxy is labeled as backlash or misogyny. Decades on, the human cost silenced male victims, fatherless children, eroded due process, and polarized relationships all remain the bitter legacy of this gynocentric folly. The phone calls of April 1996 were not an anomaly. They were the predictable scream of a reality the official narrative refused to acknowledge. So, what do these three arcs have in common? People in power introduce a discriminatory policy favoring women and negatively portraying men, either directly or indirectly. Ordinary citizens, mostly men, and academics quickly notice the biased and gynocentric representations and point out the mistakes. The companies or authorities deliberately choose not to acknowledge and instead shift the blame onto the men who are raising the concern. The important point to note is that, like in all other countries, none of the men's rights activists said women shouldn't have rights nor should they be discriminated. Their only request was to put an end to making unfair and biased assumptions about men. Now, let's proceed to interact with Peter Zohrab, the OG men's rights activist from New Zealand. I'd like to start with a gentle reminder that June is actually Men's Mental Health Awareness Month. So please don't forget to check on men and boys in your circles and families and your any areas that you can cover. Please look out for the brothers. I would kindly request the audience. And with that, let's move on to today's guest, Mr. Peter Zohrab from New Zealand. And before we proceed into the question sessions, I would like to give a brief introduction about him so that the audience will understand what exactly his work constitutes. Mm-hmm. And here it is. If women could tell the difference between fact and fiction, and if men could tell the difference between their brains and their testicles, there would be no such thing as feminism. So Peter Zohrab is a prominent New Zealand-based men's rights activist, masculist, and anti-feminist polemicist who has been operating in the men's rights spaces since 1987. And most people online in the 90s would have seen his posts on Usenet about the feminazis. This was much before internet and user forums were even a thing. His works are a hybrid of linguistic, cognitive science analysis, and intense anti-feminist critique. He has authored numerous open letters to government, ministries, and academic boards protesting the gynocentric bias, political correctness, and the suppression of free speech. He is also an academic, researcher, qualified educator, and legal graduate. He has also founded, led, or operated as a principal officer for several prominent New Zealand masculist organizations and political vehicles, such as New Zealand Men for Equal Rights Association, New Zealand Equality Education Foundation, a trust he established to independently publish and distribute literature focusing on men's issues. Please bear with me because there's a lot more about this person here, which I'm really fascinated about. Okay. He holds an extensive list of academic qualifications, all of which reflects in his excellent book, Sex, Lies, and Feminism, which was published roughly around 2000. He was also featured in a 22.5-minute local documentary in New Zealand in 2005 called as Save the Males, which explored the claims of men's rights groups that the feminist movement has gone too far, suggesting that the New Zealand has become an insidiously anti-male state and the need for men's rights movement to stand up for the rights of the Kiwi blokes.
Well, thank you for the invitation.
Yeah.
Pleasure.
So the first question I would like to proceed with is it accurate to say that you are the pioneer of men's rights movement in New Zealand?
I would say so, because when I started in 1987, I didn't know of any other men's rights activists in New Zealand or fathers' rights activists. Mm-hmm. And that is why I reached out to American men's rights organizations. Yeah. Right. And I'd like to mention here Richard Doyle from Minnesota, who was the main guy that I dealt with for many years in America. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. So if I understand it correctly, you also belong to the first generation men's rights activists in New Zealand, like people such as Martin Lewis or John Potter or Kerry Bevan or Jim Bagnall and the rest of the people.
Yeah. I'd just like to say here, though, that we were separated geographically, right?
Yes.
Okay. So I was based mainly in the Wellington area, okay, which is in the center of the country. Mm-hmm. At the south of the North Island, whereas most of those people were up the north in the Auckland or Hamilton areas. And so I didn't have much personal contact with them, all right? And so, and most of them were centered on fathers' rights issues, okay, mainly.
Right, got it. So moving on, in your book, Sex, Lies, and Feminism, chapter 14 to be precise, you introduced this concept called as frontman fallacy. And for the audience who might not have not heard about it, frontman fallacy is the mistaken belief that men who are in positions of authority in democratic systems use their power mainly to benefit other men. And it's very similar to the later concept that was brought onto the internet spaces called as apex fallacy that most of the mainstream MRAs use. So my question here is, how do we utilize the frontman fallacy as a diagnostic tool in real-time New Zealand governance?
Okay, well, the frontman fallacy is points to the fact that men were, and in many countries still are, in most positions of authority. However, this is they do not have in their minds an agenda, right? An ideology which looks at men's self-interest and perpetuates men's self-interest. What their ideology is generally, and has been in the past in Europe, and in America and in New Zealand in the past, whereas in many countries it's still in the present like that, they have an ideology of the family. They are protecting and promoting the family, which involves, women and children and the whole of society. Okay. Now, what happened was that feminism decided to concentrate on women and say that men were oppressing women because they could count the number of women in positions of authority, and they could count the number of men in positions of authority, and the numbers were not equal. So they said, "Ha ha, men are oppressing women." But they didn't prove that men were oppressing women by pointing to policies. Okay, the feminists have never pointed to policies and said, "Oh, these policies oppress women, and these policies oppress men, and this is the difference between these numbers of policies." Okay, because the feminists have never looked at any policy ever from a men's point of view. Okay,
yes.
So the fallacy is that men are in positions of power been oppressing women, whereas in fact they have been promoting the family, a male-headed family, and the feminists, on the other hand, have been promoting a policy of a female-headed society and disintegrating the family so that everyone could be a separate individual, and then, of course, the women get custody of the children.
Right. Got it. So, despite the efforts from men's rights activists to expose the double standards in feminist advocacy, feminism seemed to have grown consistently and only stronger by every decade in its application. Do you think feminism is a typical version of how a religion usually grows? Like
exactly,
right?
Yeah.
So please allow me to finish that last line.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. So it's almost like how religion sells fear and hysteria, manufacture hellish scenarios, and promote actions that promise a heavenly utopia.
Yeah.
How do you connect the dots between religion and how feminism actually grew back in the 80s and the 90s?
Well, one thing you should notice is that in many cultures, certainly in my culture, feminism has been actively opposed to standard religions, right? Say Christianity. In New Zealand, the main religion has been Christianity. And Christianity, or especially Catholicism, has been against abortion and has been in favor of the male priesthood, okay? And things like that. So, and these things are things which feminism are against. So they're against many ideas of traditional religions. And I expect that in India, it would be against Hinduism, it would be against Islam, and so on, and probably Sikhism. I don't know much about Sikhism, right? And so on. So, so it is, and that is one aspect of it being a religion, because it is opposed to other religions. Okay.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And secondly, it is like a religion because it teaches concepts, it teaches doctrines to various people, and then people have these doctrines in their minds, and then they just act on the basis of these doctrines and never actually consider alternatives. There was no rational debate. Feminism does not promote a rational debate between one side and the other side. You have never seen a feminist university or media company or government organization promote an open debate between, say, an extreme masculinist and an extreme feminist, and then get them to discuss a large number of issues, because the feminists just want to suppress dissent.
Yes. Yes. Got it. While highlighting vaginal politics in your book, you spoke about how feminism created the slogan, the personal is political, where it
Yeah,
eventually forced men to choose between their marriage and their personal principles,
yeah,
between love and integrity, and also between wealth and poverty.
yeah.
So, even male decision makers at the top were subjected to intense pressure from both individual women and as well as the female pressure groups. So, what is a realistic mechanism to install genuine men's advocates into decision making positions while also making sure that their advocacy is not something performative?
What do you mean by performative? I'm not sure how you understand
Um,
that term.
in the sense that the politician or the male decision maker would pretend to care about men's issues, but on the other side, he usually doesn't. All he did was give a sound bite just to appeal
Um,
to the voters.
okay.
And once he gets nominated to the position of power, he wouldn't much actually do anything about changing the issues and changing the environment for the betterment of men.
Okay. Well, I think mass movements are very important. Like, for example, I've heard recently, today, in fact, I heard about a cockroach movement in India, right?
Yes,
So,
I'm so embarrassed.
yeah, well, I'm not advocating the cockroach movement. All I'm just saying is that if men could have a meninist, or what do you want to call it, masculinist movement in India,
Yeah.
which was which was modeled on the cockroach movement, okay, in the sense that it had a lot of popularity and was very very active, and it had demonstrations on the streets in large numbers, you know, and to put pressure on the politicians. I think the important thing is pressure on the politicians, pressure on the media, pressure on the government, pressure on the educational institutions. So that is what I think is important, is pressure. So what I have used in New Zealand is one thing we have here, which is called um, the Official Information Act, which is where you can write to a government department or a minister and ask them a question and for information that they may have about a particular issue, right? And of course, they can reply in various ways, like, for example, like they have no information on the issue. But if they have no information on that issue, it means they don't care about the issue, right? The whole government doesn't care about the issue. So if there's a men's issue and you write to the relevant minister or department and say, what is your information on this issue? And they say, oh, we have no information on this issue. This means that they don't care about this issue, right? And then if you publish that on the internet in all sorts of different ways and channels, then everyone can see. You post your question, you post the answer, and then everyone can see there is no answer because they don't care. And if they do have an answer, you can reply to the answer and analyze it and show maybe that it is hypocritical or doesn't answer the question or it needs to supply further information. So I think from my point of view, the important thing to do is to subject the media, the education system, and the government, whether it's the politicians or the bureaucrats, or even the legal system, to pressure by asking them for information. If they don't give the information, well, everyone knows they're not giving the information. And then you ask why they're not giving the information, then everyone can see why they're not giving information, because they reply and they say, oh, well, we don't want to give the information because of A, B, or C. Right?
Makes sense. Yes. So I also want to ask you whether you saw any improvement in the societies of New Zealand regarding the discussions surrounding men's issues, like, for example, suicide rates or circumcision of the boys or elective abortion. Are these topics still a taboo in majority of the places?
Well, these are still very big topics which men have not made any impact on, right? Yet, right? However, I feel that I have made a big impact in New Zealand and possibly other countries because at one social event I was at, I was accused of being famous. See? Someone said, "Oh, you're famous," but because New Zealanders are very good at gossip, so he sort of tried to point out some bad things about me. See that, Now, the point is that he heard from going to social events or whatever. But the point is that unless you make an impact, you don't get attacked, right? And so the usual way you get attacked, I get attacked, is in social circumstances, or when I go to use a service which is dominated by females. Mm-hmm. And most services, this is the point, the service industries, whether it's teaching, health, retail, or whatever, are dominated by females. Receptionists, nurses, shop assistants. Typically they're females. So that you get subjected to blocks and hostile receptions from time to time to various degrees by accessing your ordinary life. And so thereby that you're getting an impact. And then then what you see is, because you are publicizing stuff on the internet and you're getting these negative responses from feminists or females or male feminists, in your day-to-day life, then you know that you're having an impact. And then you see that various parties that are roughly aligned or closer to your own views are gaining support. Okay, and this is what you find, in right-wing parties in New Zealand, in Britain, and in mainland Europe, and also, of course, President Trump in America have gained in strength. And this is on the basis of a whole lot of different policies. Okay, this is not just on the basis of men's rights, but it also involves things like abortion and which is connected with men's rights. Because why is it connected with men's rights? Because if a woman wants to have an abortion, she does not have to ask the father for permission. But if she doesn't have an abortion, the father has to pay child support if he leaves her or she leaves him. Okay? So that is a men's rights issue, abortion, as well as a fetus rights issue. So what's happened is you don't, as a men's rights activist, you do not always know what effect you're having, except from the negative reactions that you get from people. And because every day, I mean, not every day, but quite frequently, I just go out in the street or go shopping or something like that, and I get some negative reactions. I know that is because I've been having an effect. Lots of people know who I am, and I have no idea who they are. Who are these people? But they show some kind of aggression towards me, and so I know, I've had some effect, you see. And so this is the best that the ordinary men's rights activist can can hope to have is if they publicize stuff on the internet and show people to you that they can use their own intelligence, look at the facts as they are. They don't have to be taught. We don't have to teach them what's true and what's not true. They can see, if they see the questions that are asked of ministers and so on, and see the answers that are given, then they can see for themselves, right? They don't have to come to me and, ask me what I think. They can make up their own minds.
Yes.
And so that is the point, to make people, make up their own minds on the basis of information. The point is that information is hidden from the ordinary people.
Yes.
And it's feminists who are hiding it.
Yes, I agree.
Okay.
Yes. So I seem to have come across a blog post from 2006, roughly, where it states that no fathers and men's lawyers are allowed in New Zealand, question mark. There's a quote by you where it states that in a free society, there is no legal basis for denying someone entry to the legal profession on the basis of their political views.
Yeah.
The fact alone that a female council member laughed when I told the council about being assaulted by feminist law students casts doubt on the judgment of the council. Were you denied entry into the legal profession because you align with men's rights movement politically?
Well, yes and no. I think so. I think yes, but the point is that the Wellington District Law Society did not explicitly say what I needed to do to get accepted, and they did not say explicitly why they had rejected me. Okay, because there was a very vague criterion in place.
Mm-hmm.
And so they used that vague criterion. I tell you what I do know, and that is when I went to I went previously to the office of the Wellington District Law Society to see the secretary. He had his door open, and he was speaking loudly on the phone, presumably to someone else, but I think he was just pretending to speak on the phone to someone else. But he was speaking loudly, so I could hear from outside. And he said, I'm the only one who's allowed to be rude to a judge. That's what he said to me. And when I went to the actual hearing where a committee of the Law Society, District Law Society, refused to endorse my admission as a lawyer, this same secretary refused to shake my hand. Okay. I had a friend, a colleague from the men's rights movement who was there with me, and his hand was shaken by the secretary, but the secretary did not shake my hand. Okay. So he was kind of showing disapproval in that way. And so I assume that you could take those two things together and say, all right, I was refused entry into the law into legal profession because they thought that I had been rude to a judge. And then afterwards, I spoke to a legal person, after they had refused me, and the legal person said, the lawyer said, "Oh, what you needed to have done was apologize." Okay, so they didn't tell me beforehand that I had to apologize for something, and I know what it was that I was supposed to apologize for. I was supposed to apologize because I criticized Dame Sylvia Cartwright, who was the Governor General of New Zealand at a point in time for 3 or 4 years. Before that, she'd been a judge, and she'd been a feminist judge. She was famous for an inquiry into cervical cancer at a particular hospital. and National Women's Hospital in Auckland. And that's her claim to fame. And then after that, she became Governor General. And then so I felt I could criticize her as being when she was a Governor General. But after that, she went and became a judge in Cambodia in the War Crimes Tribunal there about the Pol Pot regime, the Khmer Rouge. And so, but that was afterwards. Okay, so anyway, what the Law Society was saying basically was she was once a judge, therefore she was always a judge, and therefore you're not allowed to criticize her.
Right.
If you want to be a lawyer.
Right.
Which is ridiculous. If she's a Governor General, if she stops being a judge and she starts being a Governor General, then it's a political position. If she should be criticized, according to my opinion, I should be able to criticize her. Okay? It's nothing to do with her having been a judge or the fact that maybe she could be a judge later on. Okay? Do you see? So that is the mentality, and it's basically a feminist issue because I was criticizing her on feminist grounds.
Right. My goodness. Okay.
Yeah. So it's pretty complicated.
I'm not shocked nor surprised. I'm only trying to see the similarity of these situations.
Yeah.
For people involved in men's rights spaces. There's a lot of similarity.
Oh, I'm sure a lot of this goes on.
Yes.
Yeah. A lot of this stuff goes
on. Is there any particular reason why your online presence is relatively less? Because I saw several news articles and blog pieces mentioning about men's rights conferences in New Zealand, but there's rarely any videos associated with these conferences, even with your documentary as well, Save the Males. What is the reason for this? Is there any specific reason, or is it copyright issues or something like that?
Oh, well, there are various things. One is I don't usually do videos.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Another one is that I don't normally associate with the other men's groups because in the past I had experiences with them, and we have had differences of opinion. Okay, like for example, I joined or formed an international pro men association or something like that. I think it's called IPMA, International Pro Men Association. And I invited some colleagues, from the men's rights movement from the Hamilton area to join, and they agreed they'd join. So then we had a discussion on email about the Constitution. Okay. And then I found that they hadn't even read the Constitution. Okay. Yes. And they decided that they would just set up their own little branch in Hamilton, irrespective of the Constitution. The Constitution didn't say anything about individual branches or anything like that. It was supposed to be an international organization, so we could concentrate on organizations like the United Nations and the IMF and the World Health Organization and all these other organizations were all feminist infiltrated, to some extent. So so then I decided, well, I was going to resign unless these people were booted out of the organization. And so these people were not booted out of the organization, so I resigned, right? So that's, that was my last attempt to get involved with other men's groups in New Zealand, which are small anyway, and also not what I would call very sophisticated. Okay, you know what I mean? And so that's why I'm not involved in those kinds of things. And also, recently I have posted less often than before because A, I've posted a huge amount of stuff already, and B, I've had software issues recently because I've been using Dreamweaver, which is a Macromedia Dreamweaver, which is used to be a program which I had on my hard disk, but it's not compatible with modern versions of Windows. So I had to stop using that, and so I'm just learning a replacement for that. And then, but then I'm not going to post quite as often as I used to because, as I say, I've posted an awful lot of stuff, and I'm sure no one in the world has ever read the whole of it.
Hard to argue because I when I did the research for finding out about your work, I could see that there's a huge library of work that's been almost never brought in front of me by any of the spaces that I usually interact with. And I'm glad that I discovered your work, and that's the reason we're here today.
Well, I'm very glad you discovered me. You know, I'm honored. Yeah.
Likewise. So, did you get any chances? Did you get any chance to collaborate with the MRAs from other countries and participate in international men's conferences?
I went to one. I've only been to one international men's conference, and that was in Greece. Okay, and that was run by Nikos. Just I think what his second name was. But anyway, Spitalis or Spitalis, Nikos Spitalis. Okay. And I recommend, well, possibly interviewing him, but I don't know how good his English is. He speaks Greek and he speaks French.
Okay.
But I speak French too, so I spoke to him in French.
Got it.
So I don't know how good his English is, right?
All right. That's okay.
Okay. Another person I'd like to recommend is also the translator of my book into Spanish. Okay, which you will be able to see from my website. Okay, just in case I can't remember his name at the moment, and also the translator of my book into Portuguese. Again, you will see on the website there. Okay, these two people they're very good at written English. How good they're spoken English, I don't know. I don't know.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Okay. If you don't mind me asking, I think I've come across a news piece from 2015, and it says that men's rights activist loses third bid for appeal over train assault. Is that true? Is that true? What exactly happened, if I may ask?
Right. Oh, well, you know, this it's very similar to what's just happened in Britain. Do you know what's happened in Britain, which has got a lot of publicity, about a police arresting a guy who was dying from stab wounds?
Oh,
you haven't heard about that?
I haven't heard about it. Probably okay. I would have, but I'm not able to recall it.
Yeah. Well, this is what I talked to you about previously, was that the police, like almost all other organizations, are taught feminism. Okay. Right. And so and also they're taught, you know, I mean, in India, I know something about India because I've studied linguistics and I know something about the languages and the castes and the minorities in India and so on. So I know that you have preferential systems for various minorities, you know, and you have 30% quota for women in the
you are well informed. I'm really glad about it.
Yeah, and you know, preferential systems for various minorities, you know, and so it's very similar. It's just a question of who's the majority and who's the minority. Okay, so now in England, what happened recently was that some white young male was handcuffed by police when he was dying from stab wounds from a guy who apparently was a Sikh. Okay, so happened to be a Sikh. Now, in my case, you know, I phoned up the police and said I'd been assaulted on a train by a Maori woman. Okay, and the police arrested me. All right, and they gave her a warning. And so anyway, everything on there it's a very long story because I pursued the appeal process as far as I could and published it all up there so everyone could see.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
And so so that's the basic situation. And it's the same in both situations. What happens in both situations is the police are taught, and it varies from place to place. I mean, different places in New Zealand are more conservative than other places, right? It may be the same in India. But I mean, where I am now, it's in the South Island, it's more conservative than when I was at that time. At the time, it was the most kind of liberal in a bad sense place in New Zealand, and the mayor of the local council had been a lesbian and had promoted her council as being the first white ribbon council in New Zealand. White ribbon means violence against women. It doesn't mean being against violence. It means only being against violence against women.
Yeah.
And then the senior police officer at that particular police station previously had also been a lesbian. Okay. The current head of police at that particular police station had been one who I had written an article previously about, saying that he should be sacked because he promoted the white ribbon campaign, right? And I'd already said that he should be sacked, and so there's little expectation that I would be treated fairly. You know what I mean? Right? But I don't go all the details. We're going to take about a couple of hours to tell the whole story.
So I understand. I think I can connect the dots when you have mentioned how they may have unfairly treated you under the law. I can probably pick it up. All right. And I think we've almost reached the end of this session. So would you like to tell the audience where they can find your work?
Yes. It's Men Have Rights, all one word, okay? Dot Peter Zohrab, one word, dot NZ.
Got it. And I'll make sure to attach the links as well. So that
Thank you very much.
And I hope more people discover your work and benefit from the insights that you have provided based on your experience within the New Zealand ecosystem of the feminist tyranny. And I hope we continue the fight, taking inspiration from you.
Thank you very much. And thank you for your efforts and your initiative.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Peter. Thank you for joining. And I hope to interact with you again, given a chance. And we'll see what we can do.
Yep.
Thank you. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.